It was a lazy Saturday afternoon. 4 friends huddled in the back of the town library. They were bored, so very bored. Jake, the tall one, reached for a book at random. It was old and dusty. He sneezed as he opened it.
Guys, look at this.
He whispered excitedly. A folded paper fell out. Mia, always curious, snatched it up. She unfolded it carefully. It was a map, an ancient map by the looks of it. The paper was yellowed and crinkled.
It's a map of the forest outside town,
said Zach, peering over her shoulder. He was the outdoorsy one, always up for an adventure. The 4th friend, Lily, looked skeptical. She pushed her glasses up her nose.
That can't be right, she said. The forest on this map is huge. Ours is tiny.
They studied the map closely. Strange symbols dotted the parchment. There were words in a language none of them recognized. But one thing was clear. At the heart of the forest was a clearing. It was marked with a symbol that looked like a star inside a circle. The next day, they met at the edge of the forest. Backpacks were filled with snacks and water. Zach had brought a compass. Lily had her trusty notebook. Jake carried a first aid kit. Mia clutched the map tightly. They were ready for adventure. The forest seemed different today. The trees loomed larger than usual. Shadows danced at the corners of their eyes. They followed the map carefully, left at the crooked oak, right at the stream, straight past the boulder shaped like a bear. Hours passed. The forest grew denser, darker. They should have reached the town by now, but the trees showed no sign of thinning. Lily checked her watch.
This is impossible, she muttered. We've been walking for 5 hours. We should be out of the state by now.
Just as they were about to give up, they saw it. A faint glow ahead. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. They pushed through a thick curtain of vines and gasped. Before them stretched a vast forest, much bigger than their little woods. The trees here were ancient, massive, and they seemed to whisper as the wind rustled their leaves. As night fell, the forest came alive. Literally, flowers bloomed before their eyes. Their petals glowed softly in shades of purple and blue. Fireflies danced in intricate patterns. They spelled out words in a strange flowing script, then dispersed before the teens could decipher them. The trees themselves seemed to shift and move. Their bark rippled like water. Faces appeared in the knots and whirls. They smiled secretively at the awestruck teenagers. A path of glowing mushrooms appeared at their feet. It beckoned them deeper into the woods. Soft music drifted on the breeze. It was unlike anything they had ever heard. Haunting melodies intertwined with rhythms that made their feet want to dance. The air itself seemed to shimmer with magic. It tingled on their skin, made their hair stand on end.
I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, he whispered, his eyes wide.
Mia giggled nervously. Zach looked like all his birthdays had come at once. Even Lily, usually so skeptical, was enchanted. They followed the mushroom path, hearts pounding with excitement and just a little fear. What would they find at the end of this magical trail? The path led them to a massive clearing. It was alive with light and sound and movement. Creatures of all shapes and sizes bustled about. Fairies flitted through the air, trailing sparkles. Gnomes with long beards hurried past, carrying trays of exotic fruits. In the center stood an enormous tree. Its trunk was as wide as a house. Lanterns hung from its branches. They cast a warm, inviting glow over everything. At its base, a stage had been set up. Musicians unlike any they'd ever seen played instruments that defied description.
Welcome, wanderers.
A voice boomed. They turned to see a centaur smiling at them. His human half was elderly with a long white beard, but his horse half pranced with youthful energy.
You've arrived just in time for the centennial celebration of the Enchanted Forest.
The teens stood speechless. This was beyond their wildest dreams. Creatures from stories and legends surrounded them, and they were being welcomed like honored guests. The centaur ushered them forward.
Come, come, the festival is about to begin. It only happens once every 100 years. You're in for a treat.
As they entered the festival grounds, each teen felt drawn in a different direction. Mia's eyes were fixed on the stage. The music called to her very soul. Without a word, she drifted towards it. Her friends watched in amazement as she began to dance. Her movements were graceful, otherworldly. The musicians nodded approvingly. Zach found himself surrounded by a group of satyrs. They were telling tales of great quests and adventures. His eyes shone with excitement. He peppered them with questions about the forest, about their journeys. The satyrs seemed delighted by his enthusiasm. They began teaching him woodcraft secrets passed down for generations. Lily was drawn to a quiet corner. There, an ancient tree nymph sat surrounded by books, living books. Their pages fluttered like butterfly wings. Lily approached cautiously. The nymph smiled and beckoned her closer. Soon, Lily was absorbed in knowledge from beyond her world. Her notebook filled rapidly with diagrams and notes. Jake found his place among a group of dwarves. They were craftsmen of incredible skill. Jake had always been good with his hands. The dwarves recognized this. They showed him how to infuse simple objects with magic. Jake's eyes lit up as a wooden figurine he carved came to life in his hands. A hush fell over the festival. The music stopped abruptly. The laughter died away. A chill wind blew through the clearing. It extinguished half the lanterns. The teens regrouped, sensing something was wrong. They looked to the centaur for explanation. His face was grim. "Centaur, it's the Shadowmancer," he said quietly. "An ancient evil. It sleeps for a century at a time, but it always wakes for our celebration. It feeds on joy and light. If we don't stop it, it will consume our entire forest." The magical creatures looked terrified. Some were already starting to fade, becoming translucent. The great tree at the center of the clearing groaned. Its leaves began to wilt. The teens exchanged glances. They couldn't let this happen. This wondrous place had to be protected. "Jake, what can we do?" "Centaur, I'm sorry you've been caught up in this. This is not your fight. But there might be a way. The Shadowmancer can only be defeated by those pure of heart, those who don't belong to our world. Humans like you." The teens huddled together. They were scared, sure, but they were also determined. This magical place had shown them wonders. They couldn't just abandon it. "Lily, we need a plan." She opened her notebook. "The nymph told me about the Shadowmancer. It has weaknesses. Zach, the satyrs mentioned something too. They said it can't stand the light of true courage. Mia, the musician, they said harmony can disrupt its power. That's why it always attacks during the festival. To stop the music. Jake, the dwarves said objects infused with positive emotions can hold it back, but not for long." They looked at each other. The beginnings of a plan formed in their minds. "Mia, okay, here's what we do." She outlined the plan quickly. It was dangerous. It might not work, but it was the best chance they had. The centaur listened gravely. Then he nodded. "Centaur, it could work, but you must hurry. The Shadowmancer grows stronger by the minute." They split up. Each had a role to play. Mia ran to the musicians. She whispered urgently to them. They nodded and began to play. A melody of hope and courage filled the air. Zach gathered the bravest creatures he could find. He led them to form a circle of light around the great tree. Lily consulted her notes. She began to chant in a language she'd just learned hours ago. Ancient words of power. They glowed as she spoke them, pushing back the encroaching darkness. Jake worked furiously. His hands flew as he carved figurine after figurine, each one he infused with thoughts of friendship and bravery. The Shadowmancer materialized in the center of the clearing. It was a writhing mass of darkness. Tentacles of shadow lashed out. They tried to snuff out the lights, to silence the music, to break the circle of creatures. But the teens stood firm. Their combined efforts held it at bay. For a moment it seemed like a stalemate. Neither side could gain the advantage. Then Mia had an idea. She grabbed her friend's hands. "Mia, S1. Together!" They joined voices with the musicians, sang a song of friendship and courage. Their voices rang out, pure and true. The Shadowmancer shrieked. The sound was terrible, like nails on a chalkboard multiplied 1,000-fold. But the teens didn't falter. They sang louder. The magical creatures joined in. Soon the entire forest rang with their song. Light burst from the teens' joined hands. It shot towards the Shadowmancer like an arrow. The creature of darkness writhed. It tried to flee, but it was too late. The light pierced its heart. With a final ear-splitting shriek, it dissolved. Fragments of shadow scattered on the wind, then vanished entirely. For a moment there was silence. Then a cheer went up. It started soft but grew until it shook the trees. The forest came back to life. Colors returned brighter than ever. The great tree's leaves perked up, they shimmered with renewed energy, the fading creatures solidified, their joy was palpable, they danced and sang and celebrated. The centennial celebration resumed with twice the energy. The centaur approached the teens, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Centaur S5, you have saved us all, we are forever in your debt. The forest will remember your courage for centuries to come. As the celebration continued around them, the magical creatures approached the teens. Each offered a token of gratitude. Mia received a flute carved from a branch of the great tree. When she played it, flowers bloomed at her feet. Zach was given a compass. It didn't point north, but towards adventure. Lily's gift was a book. Its pages were blank until she asked it a question. Then knowledge would flow across the paper like living ink. Jake received a small chisel. It could carve magic into any material, making even the simplest creation come alive with wonder. The teens were overwhelmed. They tried to protest, to say they couldn't accept such magnificent gifts. But the creatures insisted. Centaur, S5. These are not just rewards, they are responsibilities, ways for you to keep the magic of the forest alive in your world. As dawn approached, the teens knew it was time to leave. They had lives to return to, families who would be worried. The magical creatures led them to the edge of the enchanted forest. The path home suddenly seemed clear. They turned to say goodbye. To their surprise, the forest was already fading from view. They found themselves back in their own familiar woods. The sun was just rising. Somehow no time had passed in the real world. They looked at each other. Was it all a dream? But no, the gifts in their hands proved otherwise. The memories were too vivid, too shared to be imagination. They made a pact then and there, to keep the secret of the enchanted forest, to protect it from those who might exploit it, but also to keep its magic alive in small ways. Through music and stories, through knowledge and creativity, they would be ambassadors of wonder in a too often mundane world. As they walked home, they felt changed. They had faced darkness and emerged victorious. They had seen wonders beyond imagination. But most importantly, they had discovered strengths within themselves they never knew existed. Courage, creativity, wisdom, and harmony. Gifts more valuable than any magical token. They knew they would return someday. In a year or 10 or 50, the forest would be waiting. Until then, they had work to do, a little magic to spread, a lot of growing up to do. But they would face it all together. Friends bound by an adventure beyond believing. And a secret that would keep wonder alive in their hearts forever.